The grand chancel of the Concordium was a symphony of impossible architectures, a space carved from the heart of a gravitationally locked moonlet. Light did not shine here. It flowed, a liquid luminescence that cascaded from the vaulted, crystalline ceiling, pooling on the polished obsidian floor where the daises of the great species floated in silent judgment. At the chamber's heart, a swirling nebula of holographic data pulsed with a soft, anxious rhythm, casting ephemeral ghosts of light across the faces of the assembled delegates. It was a place of immense power, the nexus of 1,000 star systems, and yet today it was a chamber of profound and unsettling silence, a quiet so deep it felt like a pressure against the senses. The silence was a living thing, nurtured by fear. The focus of this fear, a single, stark image at the center of the holographic storm, was a vessel. It was long, brutally utilitarian, and ancient beyond any reasonable measure. Its hull was a pitted, scarred expanse of an alloy that defied immediate analysis, a deep, lusterless gray that seemed to drink the sensor light poured upon it. It bore no elegant fins, no glowing energy conduits, no sign of the sophisticated gravitic nacelles that powered the fleets of the Concordium. It was a relic, a ghost that had drifted from some forgotten epoch into the veiled nebula, a region of strategic and economic importance, and there it had simply stopped. It hung in the void, inert, silent, and utterly perplexing. Primarch Vorlag of the Cathar was the first to break the sanctified quiet. His voice was the grinding of tectonic plates, a resonant bass that emanated from his towering, crystalline form. Light fractured through his body as he shifted on his floating dais, creating a kaleidoscope of impatient colors. "It is an insult," he declared, the words sharp-edged and absolute. "A piece of cosmic debris, a derelict from a species so primitive they still encased their warriors in metal coffins. That this artifact has paralyzed the trade lanes and occupied the attention of this esteemed body for 3 full rotations is a testament to our own declining resolve." He gestured a multifaceted limb toward the image. "Our long-range scans are conclusive. Its power signature is flatter than a dead world's core. Its metallurgical composition is archaic. There are micrometeoroid impacts on its hull that can be dated back millennia. It is a tomb, nothing more." From a neighboring dais, a swirling column of pearlescent gas shimmered, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. This was Speaker Lumina of the Xylos, a being whose physical form was as fluid as their thoughts. Their voice was a chorus of harmonious chimes, a stark contrast to the Primarch's grating pronouncements. "A tomb that appeared from nowhere, Primarch. It did not drift into the nebula." Our quantum entanglement sensors, placed at the nebula's edge, recorded a single instantaneous event of spatial displacement. One moment there was empty space. The next, the vessel was there. It arrived with no detectable drive wake, no temporal signature, no sign of transition. It simply manifested. The gaseous form of Lumina swirled with contemplative hues of blue and violet. "That is not the behavior of debris." "A spatial anomaly, then?" Vorlag countered, his crystalline structure vibrating with dismissal. "A fold in spacetime that spat out this fossil. It is a curiosity for xenoarchaeologists, not a matter for the Concordium's high command. We have wasted enough resources observing it. I propose we dispatch a reclamation vessel, tow it to a secure orbit, and have our scholars pick it apart. This species, these humans, as the fragmented data packets from their primitive communications network call them, are of no consequence. They are a nascent power, barely capable of flinging their metal cans between the worlds of their own system. They are pre-Concordium, a historical footnote that has not yet been written." There was a murmur of assent from several delegations, those who saw the universe through a lens of pure hierarchical power. The logic was sound. The evidence was clear. The ship was old, silent, and outwardly impotent. But Chancellor Xyles of the Volanti, a slender avianid being whose feathered crest twitched with nervous energy, raised a delicate, 3-fingered hand. The Volanti were merchants and diplomats. They saw the universe not in terms of power, but of variables, and this silent ship was a variable that defied all their models. "The Xylos point is one of profound significance, Primarch," Xyles chirped, his voice a series of melodic yet precise clicks and whistles. "The energy cost of such a precise, traceless displacement is astronomical. It would require a command of spacetime geometry that even the Concordium's most advanced science divisions theorize is centuries away. To manifest an object of this mass so perfectly without residual energy bleed is akin to a god. Placing a stone in a pond without making a single ripple, and there is another matter, the silence." "It is a dead ship," Vorlag boomed. "Of course it is silent." No, Lumina interjected, their gaseous form tightening, a sign of focused thought. It is not the silence of death. Our deepest resonance scans have picked up something. A faint, systemic hum buried so deep within the vessel's structure that it is almost indistinguishable from background radiation. It is not a power core as we understand it. It is more like the sound of a spring being wound, tighter and tighter over an immense span of time. An energy that is potential, not kinetic. Contained. Waiting. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The image of the ship, once a subject of derision, now seemed to possess a certain malevolence in its stillness. The pockmarks on its hull were not signs of age, but scars from forgotten battles. Its brutalist design was not primitive, but purposeful. The laughter that had echoed in the lower halls of the Concordium when the first scans were revealed now seemed foolish, born of an arrogance that the universe so often enjoyed punishing. Primarch Vorlag, however, was unmoved. The Cathar had carved their empire from the bones of 100 lesser species. Their philosophy was simple: that which does not display its strength does not possess it. Concealment was the tactic of the weak. Potential energy, waiting. These are the words of mystics, not strategists, he scoffed. It is a derelict with a failing, ancient power source. We have debated this phantom for too long. My fleet is stationed at the Eridani threshold. I will dispatch a battle group. We will approach the vessel and demand its surrender or eject its occupants. If it is a tomb, as I suspect, we will tow it away. If it is crewed by these primitive humans, we will escort them from Concordium space and teach them the humility required to interact with their betters. It is a simple, direct solution, a demonstration of our authority. The debate raged for hours, a complex tapestry of political maneuvering, philosophical arguments, and strategic assessments. The Xylos argued for patience, for a non-invasive approach, for attempting to understand the nature of the vessel before acting. The Volenti worried about the precedent. To use force on a vessel that had committed no hostile act was a breach of Concordium law, one that could destabilize fragile treaties with fringe powers. But the Cathar's influence, built on their immense military might, was pervasive. Fear of the unknown was a powerful motivator, and Vorlag offered a swift, decisive end to that fear. He played on the anxieties of the smaller powers, the silent dread that this ship represented a variable they could not control. Finally, the vote was cast. The motion to dispatch a Cathar demonstration fleet passed by the slimmest of margins. A heavy finality descended upon the Grand Chancel. The holographic image of the ancient ship remained at the chamber's center, impassive and indifferent to the fate that had been decided for it. As the delegates began to file out, their floating daises gliding silently toward the antechambers, Speaker Lumina drifted over to Primarch Vorlag's position. "I ask that you proceed with caution, Primarch," the Xylos chimed, their voice laced with a gravity that transcended mere political disagreement. "There is a concept in the fragmented philosophical texts we have deciphered from the humans. They call it a sleeping giant. They speak of the folly of mistaking slumber for death." Vorlag's crystalline form shimmered with something akin to amusement. A low, grinding chuckle echoed from his depths. "Let it sleep, then. We are the Cathar. We are not afraid of giants." He turned his attention back to the image of the ship, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. For a fleeting moment, as the liquid light of the chancel washed over the holographic display, the ship seemed to pulse, a flicker of deep, internal shadow that was gone as soon as it appeared. Vorlag dismissed it as a trick of the light, a phantom of the projectors. The laughter, quiet and confident, had returned to his thoughts. The primitives and their ghost ship would soon learn the true meaning of power. The Cathar battle group was a vision of lethal elegance. A collection of crystalline warships, their forms all sharp angles and predatory grace, they cut through the void like shards of obsidian. Light from the veiled nebula's vibrant gases glinted off their faceted hulls, casting splintered rainbows into the darkness. At their head was the indomitable Will, Primarch Vorlag's own flagship, a vessel that had shattered planetary defenses and brought entire civilizations to their knees. Aboard its command bridge, Vorlag stood like a statue carved from diamond and fury, his gaze fixed on the main viewscreen. There it was, the human ship. Against the backdrop of the swirling, incandescent nebula, it looked even more pathetic, more insignificant. It was a dull, lifeless rock in a sea of cosmic fire. The contrast between his gleaming, powerful fleet and that single, silent monolith was almost comical. His bridge crew, all proud members of the Cathar warrior caste, maintained a disciplined silence, but Vorlag could sense their shared contempt. This was not a battle. It was an extermination of vermin, a sanitation of their space. "Status of the vessel," Vorlag's voice resonated through the bridge. "Unchanged, Primarch," came the crisp reply from the sensor officer. "No power fluctuations, no emissions of any kind. Hull temperature is consistent with prolonged exposure to deep space. It is, for all intents and purposes, inert." "Open a channel. All frequencies." Standard Concordium greeting, then a formal demand for identification and statement of intent, Vorlag commanded. "Inform them they have violated Concordium sovereign territory and must submit to inspection and escort." A wave of multi-spectrum energy washed over the human vessel, carrying the Cathar's ultimatum. They waited. The silence that answered was profound, more absolute than the vacuum of space itself. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Vorlag's patience, a notoriously finite resource, began to wear thin. The ship just hung there, a silent rebuke to his authority, its very presence an act of supreme insolence. "They do not answer," the communications officer stated, his tone betraying a hint of disbelief. "All frequencies remain silent." "Perhaps their communications technology is simply too primitive to receive our broadcast," another officer suggested. Vorlag's form pulsed with a dark, angry light. "Or perhaps they are arrogant fools. Very well. The time for diplomacy has passed. Move the fleet into a standard containment formation. Power weapons to warning levels. I want our energy signatures to light up their primitive sensors like a dying sun. Let them see the power they are defying." The Cathar fleet shifted with practiced, deadly precision. The ships moved to surround the human vessel, their forms eclipsing the stars, their weapon ports glowing with contained, catastrophic energy. The space around the old warship became a cage of light and power, a web from which there could be no escape. The sheer energy output of the Cathar battle group was enough to cause gravitic distortions in the surrounding space, a flexing of the fabric of reality that was the signature of Concordium military might. On the bridge of the indomitable will, sensor displays flared to life, showing the overwhelming power they were projecting. Yet the human ship remained unchanged. It did not power up its own weapons. It did not attempt to flee. It did not even emit a distress signal. It simply endured, its scarred hull absorbing the threatening glow of the Cathar warships without reflection. And then something happened. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper. A single clear communication signal, directed with impossible precision at the flagship's bridge. It bypassed all standard protocols, all firewalls, and simply appeared. On the main view screen, the image of the derelict ship was replaced by a face. It was a human female, her features placid, her eyes a calm, steady gray. She wore no elaborate uniform, no symbols of rank. Behind her was a simple, unadorned bulkhead, its color the same dull, functional gray as the ship's exterior. Her voice was as calm as her expression, devoid of fear, anger, or any discernible emotion. It was the voice of a scholar delivering a lecture, or a pilot reading a checklist. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Unified Nations solar vessel Solitude," she said, her words translated into the Cathar's harsh, syllabic language by their own computers. "We acknowledge your presence. We must inform you that this vessel is a Warden-class Sentinel. Its current station is non-negotiable. For the integrity of your ships and the safety of your crews, we strongly advise you to disengage your weapon systems and retreat to a minimum safe distance of 1 light minute." The audacity of the statement struck the bridge with the force of a physical blow. A low murmur of outrage rippled through the Cathar crew. Vorlag himself felt a surge of cold fury. This primitive, this soft-skinned mammal dared to give him orders from inside her floating coffin. "Ambassador Rostova," Vorlag boomed, his voice dripping with menace as he stepped forward, ensuring his towering form dominated the comlink pickup. "You are in violation of Concordium law. Your vessel is a trespasser in a restricted military zone. You will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded, or we will atomize your insignificant ship. This is your only and final warning." The human Rostova did not flinch. Her gaze remained steady, her expression unchanging. It was not the look of defiance. It was the look of someone explaining a fundamental law of physics to a child. "Primarch." "H. Vorlag," she replied, her tone still unnervingly calm. "I believe you are operating under a misapprehension of the current strategic situation. This vessel is not a warship in the sense you understand. It does not fight. It resolves. You have 5 standard minutes to comply. The choice is yours." The connection ended. The face vanished, replaced once more by the image of the silent gray ship. For a moment there was only stunned silence on the bridge of the indomitable will. Then Primarch Vorlag let out a short, sharp bark of what could only be described as laughter. It was a grating, ugly sound. Resolves, the creature speaks in riddles. It is a bluff, a desperate, pathetic attempt by a cornered animal to frighten the predator. They think words will save them. He turned to his tactical officer, his multifaceted eyes burning with cold fire. Target their primary hull. A single lance shot, minimal power. I want to scar their ship, not destroy it. Let us see how their resolve holds when their precious tomb begins to boil. Primarch, the sensor officer suddenly called out, his voice tight with confusion. I am detecting something, a change in the human vessel. Report, Vorlag snapped. Its internal signature, the hum we detected earlier. It is amplifying, but the energy is not radiating outward. It's collapsing inward. The ship's internal temperature is dropping rapidly. It is approaching absolute zero, and its mass, Primarch, its mass is increasing exponentially. Vorlag stared at the screen. The ship looked no different, yet the readings were impossible. Mass could not simply be created from nothing. Energy could not simply vanish. Explain, he commanded, the single word a threat. I cannot, Primarch. The laws of physics as we know them are being contradicted. The space around the vessel is warping, not a gravitic distortion, something else. The fabric of spacetime itself is buckling around the hull. On the view screen, the stars directly behind the human ship began to bend. Not shimmer, as if from heat or an energy shield, but bend. Their light pulled into distorted, spiraling arcs as if being drawn into an unseen vortex. The vibrant colors of the nebula twisted and swirled around the ship's silhouette, which was growing darker, more absolute. The dull gray of the hull was losing its color, becoming a perfect, terrifying black that absorbed all light, all sensor waves, all reality. A low, resonant hum filled the bridge of the indomitable will, a vibration that seemed to travel not through the air, but through the bones of the crew, through the very plates of the ship. It was not a sound. It was the feeling of a fundamental constant of the universe being rewritten. Primarch, all ships report catastrophic system failures. The communications officer cried out, his composure finally shattering. Navigational arrays are offline. Gravitic drivers are fluctuating wildly. Our weapons they are not holding a charge. The energy is just draining away. Vorlag watched in horrified disbelief as the warning lights on his own command console flared red, one after another. The glowing weapon ports on his fleet, once so menacing, flickered and died, their contained power bleeding into nothingness. The ships themselves began to drift, their sophisticated systems rendered inert, their crews trapped in powerless metal shells. They were not being attacked. They were being nullified. The human ship, now a hole in the fabric of reality, an utter void in the shape of a vessel, finally spoke again. Rostova's voice, as calm and steady as ever, echoed through the Cathar flagship's emergency speakers. This is the Warden Protocol. You have been placed in a localized, non-causal containment field. All energetic and kinetic systems within this field are dampened to a state of equilibrium. You are not in danger, but you are no longer in control. We will hold you here until you agree to stand down and withdraw from this sector. The choice remains yours. Primarch Vorlag stood frozen on his bridge, a monument of crystalline shock. His fleet, the pride of the Cathar Empire, had been neutralized without a single shot being fired. They had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by a force they could not even comprehend. He looked at the perfect blackness on his view screen, the silhouette of the human ship that had become a patch of night from which no stars shone. The laughter had died in his throat, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar sensation. It was a feeling the Cathar had not experienced in millennia. It was awe, and it was terror. The sleeping giant had not just awoken, it had opened its eyes, and in their depths was the end of all things. The news of the Cathar fleet's incapacitation struck the Concordium Grand Chancel with the force of a supernova. The emergency session was convened in an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. The arrogant blustering of the previous meeting was gone, replaced by a sigh. CK cloying dread. The holographic display at the chamber's center now showed the Cathar battle group, adrift and powerless, orbiting the human ship like moons around a dead planet. The ship itself was no longer a perfect void. Its hull had returned to its dull, scarred gray, but the aura of menace it projected was 1,000 times more potent. It was no longer an object of derision. It was an icon of a power so absolute it defied their understanding. Primarch Vorlag was present, his connection patched in from the bridge of his crippled flagship. His usual vibrant, shifting colors were muted, his crystalline form seeming to sag under an immense, invisible weight. He was a being broken, his entire worldview shattered. He did not speak, but his silence was more damning than any tirade. He had laughed at the giant, and the giant had simply taken away his ability to act. Speaker Lumina's gaseous form swirled with agitated hues of silver and gray. The data from the indomitable will is paradigm-shifting, their chiming voice echoed through the stunned hall. The human vessel, the Solitude, did not project a weapon. It projected a state of being. It created a bubble of altered physics, a localized pocket of spacetime where the fundamental constants were temporarily rewritten. Entropy was accelerated for high-energy systems, causing their power sources to drain into equilibrium. Kinetic force was dampened. It is a weapon that does not destroy. It pacifies forcibly. Chancellor Xyles's feathered crest was flat against his skull, a sign of extreme distress. "The economic implications are catastrophic," he chirped, his voice trembling. "This one vessel can, at will, shut down entire fleets, disable planetary defense grids, paralyze trade routes, all without firing a shot. It is not a weapon of war. It is a tool of absolute control. What kind of civilization creates such a thing?" The question hung in the air, pregnant with terror. A civilization that could manipulate the laws of physics on a whim was not a nascent power. They were something else entirely, something ancient, something far beyond the Concordium's own evolutionary path. The fragmented data they had on humanity, their short lifespans, their violent history, their primitive technology, it all had to be wrong. A lie, a deliberate misdirection. Into this maelstrom of fear, a new communication was received. It was from Ambassador Eva Rostova. At a silent, unanimous vote of the council, the connection was accepted. Her calm, placid face once again filled the central display, her gray eyes seeming to look into the very soul of every delegate present. "Greetings, members of the Concordium Council," she began, her tone as measured and professional as before. "I have requested this audience to formally de-escalate the recent misunderstanding in the Veiled Nebula and to open a proper channel for diplomatic discourse." The sheer, unadulterated calm of her demeanor was more intimidating than any threat. She spoke as if a minor traffic incident had occurred, not as if she had single-handedly castrated the most powerful military force in the quadrant. It was Speaker Lumina who responded first, their curiosity overriding their fear. "Ambassador Rostova, your vessel's capabilities, they are beyond anything we have ever conceived. We must ask, what is the purpose of such a technology? What is the purpose of your ship, the Solitude?" Rostova's expression softened slightly, a flicker of what might have been empathy. "The Solitude is not a product of modern human technology. It is, as your scans correctly surmised, ancient. It is a relic from a past age, an era of conflict on a scale you cannot imagine. We call this technology spacetime anchoring." The Warden-class vessels were not built for conquest. They were built to end wars. They were the final, ultimate deterrent, a weapon so profound in its implications that its use signified the failure of all other paths. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Imagine a conflict where stellar bodies are used as weapons, where suns are extinguished and planets are cracked open. Such was the nature of our ancestors' folly. The Wardens were created to stop this. They do not destroy. They impose peace. They create zones of enforced tranquility where violence is a physical impossibility. The Solitude and its sister ships were humanity's greatest sin and our ultimate salvation. After our great unification, they were decommissioned, sent to the quietest, most distant corners of space, to stand as silent monuments to a past we swore never to repeat." A profound stillness filled the Grand Chancel. The delegates were not just listening to an explanation. They were receiving a confession, a historical lesson from a civilization that had seemingly walked through the fires of hell and emerged on the other side, calm and tempered. Primarch Vorlag, his voice a low, humbled rumble, spoke for the first time. "You speak of the past, yet your ship is here now. It is active. Why bring such a terrible power to our borders?" Rostova's gaze shifted to the image of the Cathar Primarch. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet, weary gravity. "Because it was never decommissioned, Primarch, not truly. It was given a new, permanent directive. The Wardens became sentinels. Their purpose shifted from ending our own wars to ensuring a greater peace. The Solitude was not sent to the Veiled Nebula. It has been in the Veiled Nebula for over 10,000 of your years, silent and waiting." The shock in the chamber was palpable. 10,000 years. It had been hiding in their space, a silent guardian or a sleeping dragon, for longer than the Concordium had existed in its current form. "Waiting for what?" Chancellor Xyles asked, his voice a whisper. This was the moment of the great reveal. Rostova gestured to something off-screen, and the holographic display in the chancel shifted. The image of the Cathar fleet vanished, replaced by a complex three-dimensional star chart of the entire galaxy. It was more detailed, more precise than any map the Concordium possessed. It showed not just stars and planets, but the flow of dark matter, the echoes of cosmic strings, the faint, shimmering outlines of hyperspace corridors they had not even discovered. This map was not the work of astronomers, it was the work of masters. The universe is older and far larger than your civilization comprehends, Rostova said, her voice taking on a new, solemn tone. There are things in the great dark between the galaxies that are inimical to life as we know it. They are not empires. They do not seek territory or resources. They are predators, intelligences that operate on principles we can only barely model. They consume. That is their nature. The map zoomed out, pulling away from their spiral galaxy until it was just a swirl of light in an immense, terrifying void. A faint, red line appeared, tracing a path from the abyss of intergalactic space toward their own galactic rim. It was a trajectory. One such predator is approaching this galaxy, Rostova continued. Our long-range listening posts, positioned in the Uit clouds of 1,000 dead suns, detected its initial emissions centuries ago. It moves slowly, but inexorably. The Solitude station in the Veiled Nebula was not random. The nebula's unique gravimetric properties provide the perfect conditions to anchor a containment field of sufficient scale to intercept it. She looked directly at the delegates, her gray eyes holding them all captive. The Solitude did not awaken because your fleet approached. Your fleet was an inconvenience, a distraction. It awoke because its primary sensors detected the final approach of its designated target. The entity will arrive at the nebula's edge in less than one standard cycle. The Warden Protocol was initiated not to disarm you, but to clear the operational theater. We were safeguarding you, from yourselves and from what is coming. The truth descended upon the Grand Chancel not like a revelation, but like a shroud. Their political squabbles, their military posturing, their arrogance, it all shriveled into utter insignificance. They had been debating the ownership of a room in a house, while a tidal wave was about to wash the entire continent away. And the humans, the silent, primitive newcomers they had mocked, were not invaders. They were the guardians on the wall, the lonely sentinels who had been standing watch while the rest of the galaxy slept in ignorant bliss. The laughter of Primarch Vorlag, the memory of it, now felt like a sacrilege. He and his people had not just been wrong. They had been children playing with fire at the feet of a god, entirely unaware of the dragons stirring in the mountains beyond. Humanity's power was not in their ability to rewrite physics, but in their willingness to bear the burden of this knowledge, to stand a silent, thankless vigil for 10,000 years. The chamber was a vacuum of thought and breath. The great and powerful leaders of the Concordium were, for the first time in their collective history, truly and utterly humbled. They were faced with two truths, each more staggering than the last. The first was that humanity was a civilization of such age and power that the Concordium was but a fleeting dream in their long history. The second was that a threat was coming from the outer dark that made all their own conflicts meaningless. It was Speaker Lumina who finally gave voice to the question that now burned in every mind. Their chiming voice was soft, stripped of all its usual confidence, filled with a nascent, terrifying hope. Ambassador Rostova, this entity, this predator, can your ship, your warden, stop it? Eva Rostova's face remained calm, but for the first time a shadow of immense, ancient weariness crossed her features. The Solitude was built to contain threats originating from our own dimension. It can create a prison of spacetime from which nothing can escape. It will intercept the entity. It will attempt to engage the final containment protocol. It will hold it. She paused, and the weight of that pause seemed to bend the light in the room. But we do not know if it will be enough. This predator is not like anything we have ever encountered. The Solitude is our first and last line of defense in this sector. It will succeed or it will fail. And if it fails, she did not need to finish the sentence. The implication was a chill that no star could warm. Primarch Vorlag, the warrior, the conqueror, finally understood. He saw the universe not as a hierarchy to be climbed, but as a fragile shore against a hungry, endless ocean. The humans were not a rival power to be subjugated. They were the builders of the lighthouse, and its light was beginning to flicker. His own fleet, so powerful and proud, was less than useless. Their weapons, designed to shatter planets, could not even scratch a foe that was not truly there. He looked at the human ambassador, a simple, soft-skinned being representing a power that beggared belief, and he felt the foundations of his civilization, of his very identity, crack. The Cathar defined themselves by strength, but what was strength? Was it the power to destroy an enemy, to burn their worlds and salt their fields? Or was it the quiet, unyielding resolve to stand on a wall for 10,000 years, waiting for a monster, all for the sake of people who did not even know you were there? Ambassador, Vorlag said, his voice raw, the grating sound of a mountain crumbling to dust. You say your ship was clearing the operational theater. The Cathar fleet is now pacified. We are at your disposal. It was not an offer of alliance. It was a plea, a recognition of a greater truth. Rostova gave a slow, solemn nod. Your cooperation is appreciated, Primarch. We will need all the sensor data your fleet can provide. We need you to watch. We need you to learn, because the Solitude is only one warden, and this is only the first wave. The holographic map in the center of the chamber pulsed, and a dozen other points of light flared into existence across the galactic rim. Each was a silent, waiting warden, a lonely sentinel at its post. And from the deep, crushing blackness of the intergalactic void, more faint red lines began to appear, all converging on their galaxy, a slow, inexorable tide of cosmic hunger. The conflict in the veiled nebula was over. The laughter had long since died. The Concordium had prepared for a war with a new rival, only to discover they were recruits in a war for the survival of all life, a war that had been raging in secret since before their stars were born. And at their side stood the quiet, unassuming figures of humanity, the ancient, weary guardians who had been fighting it all along. The true test was not of strength, but of endurance, and it was only just beginning.